Good morning. We're delighted to be sponsoring the big debate today. I'm Kevin Harris-James, head of our Birmingham office. And this is my alter ego on stage in our band, the Devil's Advocates. As you can see, we like to have a lot of fun at HCR and to support the community around us. But we take our work utterly seriously, from deal making to divorce, from advice for companies during COVID-19 to supporting the legal sector generally. We're not afraid to tackle the big issues, just as you'll be doing today. We promise to keep doing that in 2021, as well as giving our clients the excellent advice and support that they need.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to Birmingham Law Society's big debate this morning. We're so pleased that you can join us. I'd firstly like to thank our sponsors, Rod Thomas, Managing Partner of Harrison Clark Rickaby's, and Mario Majocchi, CEO of Wesleyan. Without our sponsors, we would not be able to organise our event, so we thank you so much. Turning to today's discussion, respect for the law has been described as being at breaking point following the release of a new survey of public opinion. The survey was commissioned by Birmingham Law Society following Attorney General Robert Buckland's admission that the government's internal market bill will break the law. In addition, there has been a series of reports of high-profile people breaking the COVID-19 rules. According to the survey of 1,000 UK members of the public, over 40% believe it's acceptable to break the law. 24% said that it would depend on the reasons for breaking the law, and 22.6% believe members of the government can break the law. This discussion will be in two sections. The first will be questions that I will ask our panellists, questions from members of the Birmingham Law Society, followed by pre-recorded questions. Now let's meet the panellists. Geoffrey, please introduce yourself.
Well, good morning. Good morning, Inez. Thank you for having me. I'm sitting talking to you here from the wilds of Devonshire, where I'm Member of Parliament for West Devon. I have been for, gracious, what is it now, 15 years. I'm also a practicing QC at the bar. I've been practicing for over 35 years from chambers in London. I'm recently, but very recently, crossed the floor to join some of my colleagues in the solicitor's profession by joining Withers as a consultant. So I remain at the independent bar, and for a brief and fleeting period, I was the Attorney General of England and Wales, Advocate General of Northern Ireland. But what is not often known, and one of the main reasons, Inez, apart from the compelling nature of your request to me to come on this morning, was the fact that I commenced my career, and I relate this with great affection, in Birmingham, in Fountain Court, where I was a pupil to a very distinguished Queen's Counsel, still, I believe, still practicing, namely Christopher Houghton QC. And I have very fond memories of that time. Over to Nick, I think.
Good morning, and initially I already feel sorry that I haven't got as deep a voice as Geoffrey, so I'll try and fill in. My name is Nick Green, and I'm the office managing partner for the Birmingham office of Squire, Patton, Boggs. Our firm's been in Birmingham for 150 years, originally as Lowson, latterly as Hammond, and now Squire, Patton, Boggs. We're a global law firm with 44 offices in 20 countries around the world. I'm a real estate partner, so I deal with buying and selling land and development, and I often work around the hospitality and the retail sector. And I'd like to pass over to Joe Wilson of St Philip's Chambers.
Thank you, Nick. I'm Joe Wilson, St Philip's Chambers. I'm the Chambers Director. I'm in charge of the administration of Chambers, comprising 45 staff. Collectively, we're responsible for the practice of 142 barristers, almost exclusively based in Birmingham, with a handful in Leeds. I'm now going to hand over to Lisa Jordan.
Good morning. I'm Lisa Jordan. I am the Regional Managing Partner for the Birmingham office of Irwin Mitchell. I think I was probably promoted in the advert to Managing Partner of Irwin Mitchell. I'm not. Birmingham is one of our larger offices. There are 300 of us in the office, or not in the office currently. And I also head Irwin Mitchell's National Medical Negligence Team, which covers 8 of our offices across the country. And again, there are over 300 of us at Irwin Mitchell just doing medical negligence work. I'm going to hand over now to Greg.
Hi, I'm Greg Lowson. I'm a litigation partner at Pinsent Masons. I've been the head of the Birmingham office for approaching 19 years. I'm a long-standing director of the Chamber of Commerce. In January, I'll take over as the regional chair of the CBI for 21 and 22, and I'm the Under-Sheriff of the West Midlands. And I'll hand over to Tony McDaid.
Thank you, Greg. My name is Tony McDaid. I'm the Chief Executive and Director of Clerking at No. 5 Barristers Chambers. We are currently the largest set of chambers in the UK, with offices in Birmingham, London, Bristol and Leicester. We've got 250 plus barristers. I'm also Deputy Vice President of the Birmingham Law Society and sit on the Ethics Committee of the Bar Council. Over to you, Inez.
Thank you very much, panel. Geoffrey, I'm going to start with you with our first question. So you heard me give a brief introduction about Birmingham Law Society's survey. Over 40% of the participants said it's acceptable to break the law at times. That's more than 1 in 5 said it's acceptable for the UK government to break the law. Why do you think the participants responded in that way? And secondly, what is the lawyer's role in protecting the rule of law?
Well, both of those are excellent questions, Inez. I think the first, I would say this. The recent avalanche of legal controls over our lives, particularly in the last 12 months, with the ever-shifting regulatory regime in relation to the control of coronavirus. And I do think the government made a fundamental mistake. I think the observations of the former president of the Supreme Court, Brenda Hale, are correct in this respect, which is that the actual legal framework did not reflect the guidance that was being given as to what the obligations were. And to some extent, that gap has tended to cause confusion as to the nature of the obligations that people have to observe. There have been some well-publicized incidents when it appears that the guidance at least was broken and people have conflated that with the law. So I think it's come to a head with COVID. And the mistake was not to make certain that people were honestly instructed, honestly informed as to the actual nature of legal obligations. So my first answer is this, that with the ever extending legal control over our lives, it's very important that it's accurately reflected in the messaging that is given to people, because it can bring the law into disrepute when there is confusion and lack of clarity as to what it is. Now, secondly, you've asked me the role of lawyers. The role of lawyers is fundamental to the rule of law, as we all know. The truth is that some of our dearest liberties have been purchased, have been hewn from the coalface by brave lawyers who have taken on tyranny and oppression, unfairness and injustice, going back well into the 17th and 18th centuries. And lawyers have always had to mine the seam of the law to create our liberties. I would say that we don't need to be thin-skinned about it. We're inevitably going to butt up against the powerful, the executive, in those days, the king. And we need to understand that sometimes in our lives we will face controversy, but that we are doing a job, a task that is essential to the health of our society, there can be absolutely no doubt. It's fundamental to the administration of justice, and the administration of justice is fundamental to the health of our country and its community.
Thank you. So Geoffrey has given us a wonderful, comprehensive answer. Lisa, do you have any comments you'd like to add?
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with much of what Geoffrey said. My view is that British people are largely intelligent and questioning, and I think they need to see the reasoning behind the laws that govern our country. And if they do, I would say that despite the results of your survey, Inez, we are largely a law-abiding nation. And I think that COVID and the restrictions imposed on us all by the government have been a perfect example of this, because by and large, we have followed the rules. And where we haven't followed them, I think that's because we have absolutely struggled with the logic behind them. And clearly we aren't the only ones that have. Some of our MPs and others have struggled with the logic behind them. You know, a great example of that for me was forcing pubs to close early. Not that I go to pubs very often, but what's the logic about closing a pub an hour earlier? There's absolutely none at all. So I think for me, it is the responsibility of a government to ensure that people understand and as Geoffrey says, see that there is clarity around restrictions and laws. And if they do, I think they will follow them. And you know, I don't feel that we as lawyers have any more of a responsibility, personally, than any other member of society to uphold that.
Thank you, Lisa. Tony, any further comments to add?
Yeah, I agree with all that's been said. I think the survey may have produced different results if there hadn't been so many examples of people in government, in positions of responsibility, breaking the laws themselves, because I think that was, it was a real slap in the face for the general public. Everybody was abiding by the rules, only to see that whether it was a member of parliament or somebody else just breaking the rules. And I think that was dispiriting. And I think particularly for younger people, saying, well, how can it be one rule for them and one rule for me? And I think that's where it's there was a lack of faith in everybody, whether it's lawyers and governments across the board, really, Inez.
Thank you very much. Nick, I'm going to address the second question to you first, and then I'll move on to you, Joe, if you could respond. What has your organisation done to meet the challenges of COVID-19 since the first lockdown in March 2020? And how has that impacted on the service you provide to your clients?
Thank you, Inez. I think from every business, it was a very, very quick turnaround to adjust your business, to make sure that you could focus on how you could look after your people, your clients, and operate in the circumstances that found us. And I think across the country and across the world, everybody was hugely impressed with the way that businesses managed to be so flexible, to organise working from home, to make sure that the technology worked, and to ensure that businesses could carry on in incredible circumstances. So I think our business, like most businesses, were hugely surprised that literally over a weekend you could be functioning from home as a complete business and actually be operating sensibly and effectively. So I think that was a huge testament to everybody's businesses around and about. So I think we all had similar arrangements. I think when you look forward at how you deal with that, it sort of brings up a number of different issues around the city centres. Some of the city centres now, others who will be working from home and will continue to work from home for a long time. how that impacts upon people, how they're going to operate as teams, how they're going to learn and develop, and how you service your clients. I think it's been very impressive how people have dealt with the position in the short term. It's how we now look forward to saying, how do we deal with clients and actually address matters? Are we coping in the circumstances and dealing with the situation well? Or are we actually looking at this as the long-term future, which is successful? And I think that brings up some really interesting points around future of teams, future of working together, what's the hybrid solution of agile working, what's the future of the office and how much that's going to drop in the city centres, etc. I think those are really important matters. But getting close to your colleagues and your clients, I think, has been an essential part in trying to be focusing on what they're going to do going forward and what are the interesting sound bites and how you can help your clients develop. I think those are the main points.
Thank you. Joe?
Thank you, Inez. Yeah, I think Nick was right. It was a rapid turnaround for every business. And remote working is everyday life now. And we were certainly moving towards that, and COVID's done nothing other than accelerate that for us now. And I can't see that changing. And we've got to embrace it. I think what have Chambers done to react to this and how we've helped clients, and I think we've helped solicitors, the court service, keep going and lay clients by offering video conference facilities to enable court hearings to take place. I think that's been tremendously important to keep the courts going. I think the whole experience has been, from the adversity comes, some really good things. I think it's brought the whole profession together, not just solicitors and barristers, but barristers and barristers. I look at Tony now and I remember back to the event we did as our chambers and number 5 chambers, completely unheard of before then. So I think the whole thing has brought us all together. That's a wonderful thing. But remote working is here to stay, and it's tremendously important we react to it and provide a platform for people to be able to use it.
Greg, how is Pinsent Masons? What have you done in order to meet the challenges of COVID-19?
I think probably like all of the other businesses, immediate significant investment in laptops for all employees, not just lawyers. MS Teams in the early days rolled out for everybody. Flexible working arrangements put in place, which hopefully has ended for good presenteeism. People just do not need to be in the office. We've seen massive positives. We on client webinars now, we get attendance numbers that we could never ever have achieved in old face-to-face seminars. The traffic to our website, I think we've had 4.3 million hits since May. It's running about 450,000 a month. So huge opportunities there. The flip side is, there have been challenges. I'm sure we'll talk about it today, but well-being and mental health, it has been a real issue for those people living on their own in difficult circumstances. We've responded to that with we now have over 300 mental health champions. A lot of them have produced videos sharing the experiences and challenges they've faced over the years. A portal put in place for well-being so people can access everything very, very easily. And last year we were instrumental in rolling out the Mindful Business Charter with clients. And over the last 9 months, we've been rolling that out internally. So we're changing and being much more thoughtful about our own internal working practices.
Okay, thank you. So Tony, barristers are self-employed and are used to working by themselves, but how has number 5 chambers helped to support these barristers?
Yeah, but self-employed is a key issue for them because there wasn't much support by way of any of the grants that were being there. So there were issues that were unique to barristers in that respect. Fortunately for chambers, some time ago, we set up a well-being committee. So in advance of the COVID virus, and we've been using that where either from the clerk's room, we'd spotted that somebody might need support, or the committee itself is chaired by Richard Grimshaw here in Chambers, and it consists with myself and some of the barristers. And we would find that members of Chambers, for a variety of reasons, would link in to that committee. That's not an easy thing, I think, for not just barristers, but lawyers generally, to accept really that they may be not where everybody expects them to be. And I think it's a conversation that needs to happen more often. There are a whole host of reasons as to why people will be under pressure. It can be home life, it can be work life, not getting that balance. And I think that the committee has helped us through this COVID period, and we've got more and more training on it, and that training is pretty much changing all of the time. I mean, one of the things that we're particularly proud of at the moment is that we're lining up training in relation to the menopause, which is another taboo subject, particularly with men, that needs to be looked at. And Louise Caulfield in our chambers has received a lot of praise for her work in that initiative. We're going to roll it out not just for our clerking team and members of chambers, but also I've mentioned it as a BLS that at some point in the future, and for other chambers. We think that's another thing moving forward, where we need to have an open discussion and support people that need supporting.
Thank you very much. Lisa, I'm going to ask you what Owen Mitchell have been doing to support their staff. And then I'm going to ask Geoffrey if he could give us lawyers advice on what we should be doing in order to make sure that we support our staff and our clients. Lisa.
Thanks, Inez. Can I just first of all say, going back to the question about changes during the lockdown, how grateful I was, and I think probably that I could say the same for the other managing partners and heads of chambers on, that Birmingham Law Society reached out to all of us to try and connect us, because one of the problems at the start of lockdown was that we all felt fairly isolated, and it was good to know that we were all going through the same difficulties and sharing that. So thank you for that. So in terms of what we've been doing, I think there's absolutely no doubt that lockdown has created particular pressures on our people, which we've certainly struggled to manage. And when I say people, I'm not just talking about lawyers. We've seen that impact much more so with our younger colleagues who miss the social interaction that they get in the office, and they miss the learning experience that just happens around them when they're in an office environment. And that last factor has been, I think, one of the biggest challenges for us. In terms of well-being, we have and had way before lockdown a wellbeing hub on our intranet that all of our people can access. It's got a helpline, counselling, and we have monthly, weekly sessions on things like resilience, work-life balance, sleep, exercise, and improving mental health. And one of the positives we've seen is that people, and some of them quite senior, have been very honest in sharing their own stories about how they have coped, particularly the impact on people's mental health during lockdown. So I don't feel that we're doing too badly as a firm, but I just don't think it's something we can be complacent about now or when we ever return to the office. And I'm going to be honest and say I do have some concerns about the potential for longer term damage, particularly for younger people, both from the perspective of their training and what they have missed out on, but also their confidence levels that, I think they, particularly trainees, sort of grow in confidence as the years go by, and I'm worried that they will miss that. So I think there's a challenge ahead that we've got to face head on, I think.
Yeah.
So Geoffrey, you've heard a lot of comments made by the other panellists. Do you have any advice that you could give us?
Well, I'm immensely impressed with what everybody has said. I think what it shows is the intelligence and care with which those who manage big organizations in the law are taking their responsibilities to those who work for them. We all know that our workforces, our human resources, are the most important in a service like the law. Their well-being, their ability to function is vital to the success of our businesses. And I have to say, I would feel presumptuous to give advice to so obviously experienced and careful leaders of their organizations. What does worry me a bit, Inez, is that there is lots of talk about this being a permanent state that will never go back. And I, to some extent, agree with that. extra flexibility in the way we carry out our functions and responsibilities as lawyers will probably increase now that we've actually experienced and had to experience what can be done by the means that we're on now. But I don't think we should forget, and it is implied in everything that everybody has said just now, how collegiate, collaborative, and social the activity that we have the privilege to engage is. The law is a collegiate, collaborative thing. And although I've been getting on for 40 years at a very isolated, ornery, maverick profession which encourages individualism, never underestimate the source of strength and sustenance that barristers draw from leaning on the doorway of another barrister's room in chambers and saying, what do you think about this? And guess what happened to me in court this afternoon? The deprivation of that is a serious problem. And we can't forget how collegiate the law is, not only barrister to barrister, solicitor to solicitor, and solicitor to barrister. So I hope we don't return to or we do return to something approaching the status quo, because I think for our own health, going to work is good for us. And while extra flexibility is also good, I hope we'll be able to strike a better balance when finally we conquer this wicked disease.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Yes, Joe.
Inez, thank you. Just quickly, I echo everything Geoffrey says there about barristers' chambers and the collegiate atmosphere, and we're going to work tremendously hard, as I'm sure all the law firms represented here today will do for next year. To get that back to normal, just very quickly on the wellbeing front, one of the good things these chambers did, it wasn't a reaction to COVID. We've had it in place for 2 years now, but was to engage the services of a local charity, Chaplaincy Plus, to act as a listening service. And that's worked tremendously well, because in our environment of self-employed practitioners, let's be frank, they're all in competition with each other. They're not going to go to their colleague, like Geoffrey's described, and talk about their case. Of course they will, but they're not going to go and talk about their innermost issues they might be facing. So that's worked tremendously well for us, and I would advocate that for anyone.
In the old days, they'd talk to their clerk, friend, confidant.
They still do. They still do.
Relieved to hear it.
They still do that, yeah.
I totally agree with you. I'm coming to you, Nick. And Chaplaincy Plus, I can endorse them and say that they are a brilliant charity to work with, and they are there to support lawyers and to listen to any concern that we have. So thank you for mentioning that. Nick, yes, please.
Just two quick follow-ups, if I may. Just following on from Geoffrey's point, I think there's that whole idea of where do people end up? Is it binary that some people want to be in the office all the time or some people want to be at home? I think it's much more likely, isn't it, that we end up with a hybrid position here where you've got a certain number of people who like to be in the office 2-3 days, some people like to be at home 2-3 days. And then you can try and get the benefits of working from home. It's lovely actually when people are sort of saying, I've dropped the children off at school, which I haven't done for a long time. I've been able to do certain things at home, which I haven't been previously able to do. But then you get back to the Teams issue and you can see people have the opportunity. But somebody come into the office and just say, I'm so excited to go into the office today and see people. And the second thing I just sort of say is the whole 6 or 7 months, over the last 6 or 7 months, has really hit a lot of people. I think probably one particular area, which I know we've been focused on here, is newcomers to the firm, but also young people. And I think that whole concept of learning at the elbow, passive learning, hearing conversations, and it not being can I have a Teams meeting with you to brief you on something, but just overhearing a conversation of someone's manner or how somebody dealt with a negotiation. All of those things just obviously haven't happened over the last few months. And I think that's a really big focus of things that we've missed out.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. And some firms have reopened and are operating as COVID safe as they can. Other firms haven't opened, but we all need to be mindful of our junior fee earners, make sure that we continue to support, to nurture them, because I think it's a very difficult time for them. We all need to come together. Geoffrey, the next question I'm going to ask you first. What are your thoughts on the financial package offered to help businesses recover from COVID-19? And what more could be done for the 3 million self-employed that have been excluded from the financial support?
Well, The package of support that the government has produced is, let's face it, unprecedented. It's one of the most generous in Europe. It has cost the country hundreds of billions, and it was inevitable, as I certainly have warned from the outset, and I know that the Chancellor has, that we could not do everything. This is a once in a 100-year event, and it's bound to be the case that hardship will, I'm afraid, still be entailed by this road crash that we are all engaged in. So I preface what I'm going to say by saying that we do have to be careful with the public purse. We're going to have to repay this enormous debt back, and we have done our best to be as comprehensive as we can. But having said that, I do think there is some justification in the plea, the cry that has come from those who have really received absolutely no support at all, in their concern. The problem that I'm informed by the Treasury is that in many cases it's extremely difficult to assess exactly what, if you don't, for example, have accounts, if you've only just become self-employed, you've got no track record to demonstrate your entitlement, to design a system that will be individually tailored for each particular circumstance would be just inordinately expensive, if possible at all. But I do think there's more we can do there. I know a lot of my colleagues in Parliament specific sectors and offer what remaining help we can. Additionally, I think we've got to concentrate on growing the economy next year, not taxing it. So I think for all of these reasons, it's an extremely difficult problem. I think more can be done, but what can be done, I'm afraid, is likely to be quite limited.
Thank you, Geoffrey. Tony?
Yeah, I think the governments have been extremely generous, unprecedented in history, and without the furlough scheme, I think many of us would be in difficulties. So that is brilliant. I mean, whether you vote red or blue, you can't sort of deny that. However, with the bar, I'll use as a first example, but also include lawyers that are doing publicly funded work. For the bar, the junior bar, they couldn't produce the accounts that Geoffrey had mentioned there. So they were outside of that scope, and many of them have really struggled. And that's why I touched on that when we were talking about well-being, because if you imagine somebody having gone through university, then through the bar course, etc., they already come to the bar with considerable debts. They're self-employed, so they get no holiday pay or anything like that at all. And government will know that. There are many barristers, as we know, in governments, and they will know that. And I know that the Criminal Bar Association and others did put forward a special case for the junior bar, and that was ignored. And what one has to remember as well, historically, particularly for those that are doing publicly funded work, criminal law in particular, but also legal aid family work, which affects a number of members of the Law Society throughout the country, of course, where there has been this squeeze down on the funds available from Treasury. And that's just added to the problem. So I think that when, and as I say, it's been very generous of government, we start looking at where we're dishing out money, then I do think both for the bar and for solicitors, particularly in the publicly funded areas of work, we need to really value the lawyers that are undertaking that area of work. It is grossly undervalued. A lot of these people, whether they're at the solicitor's profession or the bar, could have chosen anything. They could have chosen planning law, commercial law, or anything, but they chose to operate in the criminal field and the family field. It's a true vocation for them. And time again, whether it's a red government or a blue government, they're constantly undervalued, and that needs to stop. So when we talk about all coming together as one profession, I think that we can't turn a blind eye to that going forward, because I think that's to the detriment of the bar. I think it blocks, and the solicitor profession, it blocks diversity and social inclusion and everything else, because those areas are the main route into the profession for most people from, shall we say, disadvantaged backgrounds.
Greg, it would be really good to hear your thoughts, and also Lisa, and then if anyone else wants to pass a comment before I move on to the next question, I'll welcome your views.
I think that the only question I'd have, maybe it's another one for Geoffrey, is to what extent could the Chancellor use some of the business rates that are rightly being repaid by the supermarkets to prop up and assist, you know, the people we've just been talking about?
Well, to respond to that, and to respond also to the earlier comment, I think the difficulty we have really is that to make a special case for the bar is extremely difficult when you think of the range of other people affected by this problem. There are 3 million conventionally said to have suffered from the problem, namely that they've been unable to get access to any of the existing schemes. If we created a system just for the bar, Tony, what worries me, frankly, is that it wouldn't be good for the reputation of the bar. It would further excite the kinds of ill-informed and ignorant envy and misinformation that we all know happens. You can see the front pages of some of the newspapers now, can't you? So I think we have to devise a solution, whatever it is, that crosses throughout the sectors and tries to assist. As for hypothecation, you've mentioned, I'm unconvinced about that. The Treasury hates it, namely the assigning of a pot of money to a specific cause. No, it'll have to come out of the general funds that are available to the government. A lot of us are trying to press the government to make some kind of gesture in this direction, but whatever we do, it's not going to be what people really need. I'm afraid the best thing is for us to get back as quickly as we can, get back to work, and then we might see that boost to the economy and boost to activity that I very much hope we will see from the pent-up and suppressed energies that are obviously lying there. Let's hope so.
Lisa?
Yeah, just going to Tony's point, which I think is a really valid one, because one of the problems is that the public have this perception that all lawyers earn a lot of money, and we all know that that is just not the case.
Yeah.
And you know, I have particular sympathy for criminal barristers and the pressures that they have suffered over the last, I can't remember how many years. And Inez, you know, both you and I work in an area of law where there are some very small firms, and they are just about breaking even. And I absolutely know that without the furlough scheme, I think, you know, a fair few of them would have gone under. So, you know, immensely grateful for that and the support that provided for them. But I do think it is unfair that there is this inaccurate perception that everybody involved with the law is earning lots of money, because it just isn't true.
Thank you very much. Tony, very briefly.
Yeah, one final point on that. At the outset, it was predicted that 81% of chambers would go bust as a result of COVID and over that period, but also 91% of criminal sets. That hasn't happened, but there are some criminal sets that are folded. And I'm not saying that the bar or indeed the criminal family side of the law society should be a special case of outside of all the other self-employed as well. They should be considered too. But the difference with the legal profession in solicitors and barristers in terms of publicly funded work is they celebrate when the pay round comes round and they haven't been asked to take a further deduction. You can look over a 20, 30 year plus period and the fees have been knocked and knocked and knocked over a period, and they end up round a negotiating table to try and prevent a suggested 20% reduction being only a 10%. I don't know of any other profession in this country or indeed the world that's expected to take that kind of hit. So
yeah, but it is going in the right direction now. I mean, when I was Attorney General, I presided over and negotiated the single biggest settlement for the Crown Prosecution Service in its history. something like 15% rise in its funding, and significant increases for Crown prosecutors. And I know that Robert Buckland is working very hard within the government. He's just got a better settlement to be able to increase the legal aid fees. So there is a much more a clear understanding now of the importance of keeping our legal profession, and particularly the publicly funded one, afloat. Let's see that continue, but I think the point of turn has been reached. What COVID will do, of course, let's wait and see. We'll have to maintain the case pretty strongly, I think.
Thank you. Joe, I'm going to address my next question to you, followed by Nick, with brief responses. Next year, the government has indicated that it will bring in legislation to stop the endless legal claims from people who are refused asylum. How does the legal profession strike the balance between providing a defence for their clients and assisting in streamlining the asylum appeals process?
Excellent question, difficult one. I'm glad I got that one first. Very, very tough, I think, to answer. And I think, you know, Priti Patel's comments we all heard about asylum and lawyers. I think it attacks them, and I think the Lord Chief Justice was the one to say that, you know, lawyers shouldn't be criticised for acting fearlessly. And it's a general attack on the profession. I recognise that there has to be streamlining. As you say, where can we strike that balance? I'll pass that to Nick if I may. Hopefully that's not too much of a hot potato, but I'll come back if I may.
Thank you. Nick.
I think we've probably all got used to different government ministers being obliged to take a more populist approach to try and actually say to people to play to the gallery, to come out with a number of different sound bites which they think are going to be popular, either in terms of party or actually to get a broader support. I think, you know, clearly this is more of a political play than a legal play, but from a point of view of Priti Patel's role and the comments that she's put out there, she is playing to the gallery, and she's got some good support within her own party and on a broader arrangement. I think probably the bigger point there is, how does that impact upon lawyers? Well, it really detrimentally impacts upon lawyers. And I think that those who are working hard on the immigration side must obviously wince every time that she speaks or talks about another issue which has arisen around Brexit or around other issues which are going around the world and this country at the moment. I think probably from an immigration lawyer's perspective, I think one of the thoughts was, does this put them genuinely in danger? And clearly it has done, to demonise everybody who's working in the legal profession because they are trying to fight for their clients and defend their clients' rights is clearly a very hard line to play. I think probably across all professional services, different people have had different times when they are being selected as the bad people be around and about. There were lots of jokes around bankers for a number of different years and different sessions. In this particular zone here, the idea of saying that immigration lawyers are playing a really poor role, I think is very hard, and I do think going too far on this is clearly dangerous for the roles that they're playing. I think one understands, and things will never change, that there are going to certainly be issues which politicians know that they've got to play. It's a populist attitude, and it's going to win some votes in some of the tabloids. But actually, stepping back and taking the advice of your professionals is really something which other people must do. So I feel for immigration lawyers, particularly when people are saying that they're extremely well paid, which again is not the case in terms of the spread of lawyers. So yes, I do think it's a dangerous position, and I think sometimes when people have to take the advice and fall back on the comments and don't actually bang the table or rattle the drum quite so hard.
Thank you very much. I'm going to give anyone 1 minute if they want to comment on this point before we move to the video questions.
Inez, can I just say that I absolutely believe that her comments were inappropriate and that she was seeking to demonise lawyers. There's no question about that. What I think we as a profession need to start doing is speaking as one with a voice. We need to use the press and the whole PR system in a much more effective way than we have done historically. And for me, the Law Society, both regionally and nationally, has to have a role in that. And, you know, I am pleased to see that the current Law Society president is speaking out against potential challenges to the Human Rights Act and so on. But I just think we need to be a bit more clever about how we deal with these sorts of challenges, because they're not going to go away.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I would like to introduce Peter Wiseman, who is a member of Birmingham Law Society, and he has a question for Geoffrey Cox, QC MP.
The recent orchestrated vilification of lawyers for doing no more than carrying out their duty is worrying. On top of this, we have the senior judiciary in the country being labelled as enemies of the people. Successive Lord Chancellors appear to have ignored their oath of office in upholding the rule of law and protecting the judiciary. If the panel had the opportunity of speaking to the Prime Minister on these matters, what would they be saying to him?
Geoffrey?
That there's nothing wrong with robust disagreement on reasonable grounds with the decision of a judge. But what is wholly impermissible and what is completely wrong is to impute or impugn the motives of a judge or the propriety and sincerity and impartiality of his adjudication. There has always been a clash, and usually a creative and constructive one, between the executive, certainly in modern times, between the executive and the judiciary, in the sense that the judiciary holds the executive to account. And that is how it should be. But the reality is that, in my view, there are grounds for thinking that the sphere and scope of judicial activity is becoming, getting to a point where it is encroaching upon the legitimate sphere of the executive. Now, how you define that boundary, how you, and what you do about it is an exquisitely subtle and difficult thing. And it begs a many complex questions. But what can, even if I'm right about that, and that sense is correct, and it's a sense shared by many, not by all, the question then is, we must maintain civility between the two arms of the Constitution. And it is always wrong to attack the judiciary or judges on the basis that somehow they're motivated by anything else other than the impartial fulfillment of their oaths of office. We are extraordinarily fortunate in this country to have one of the finest judiciaries in the world and one of the most respected. It's an asset that we can leverage around the world, and we do, because Britain and English law is the lingua franca in many ways of dispute resolution around the world. Arbitration, we are one of the leading, if not the leading centre. We have extraordinary assets in our language and in the common law. And if we undermine it by attacking the judges and attacking the legal profession, it is a fundamental mistake. There is never any shame in taking arguable, well-judged points before a court. And I deplore any other suggestion. That's my minute, I think, probably over it is.
Thank you very much, Geoffrey. Our second question is from Eileen Schofield, and it's for Greg Lowson and Tony McDaid.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Eileen Schofield, and my question for you today is that I read in today's press that over 100 QCs have been asked to sign a petition calling on members of the Gentlemen's Club, the Garrick, to vote for women to be admitted to the AGM. It's well known that the Garrick is a club where senior members of the legal profession socialise with each other and form alliances and connections with other male senior members of the profession. The petition states that this is an opportunity expressly denied to women and contributes to the gross underrepresentation of women at the top of the legal profession. So my question to you is, notwithstanding that Inez is president of Birmingham Law Society and Lisa is managing partner of Irwin, What are your businesses doing, and what more can be done to bridge the gap of women in senior positions in the legal profession? Thank you.
Well, first and foremost, I think the petition is absolutely justified. It can't be right to have a group of chaps who are going to have such an influence on the future female QCs and judiciary. In terms of what we've been doing, back in 2017, we had 21% of our partners were female. We set a target of 25% by 2020. We achieved that target a year early. We now have a target of 30% female partners by 2022. 40% of our board is female. 4 of our 8 UK office heads are female, and I'm hoping that the flexible, agile working practices that we have been forced on us this year will actually be maintained, because those flexible practices, particularly for lawyers with families, I think it's going to be much easier for them to juggle, the balances of home life, career, and therefore, we should hopefully see many, many more female lawyers making it through to senior positions in law firms.
Thank you. Joe?
Me, actually, I think, Inez.
Sorry, Tony. Apologies.
Don't worry, Joe can take it though if you want. No, this is, and thank you, Eileen, for such a thought-provoking question. Eileen will know that I was a member of a club in London, and that was simply a club at the top of the Gherkin building. I think it was called Sears's at the Gherkin, and became a member because it was a good place to take clients, had fantastic views, and indeed Eileen and members of BLS and the Law Society too accompanied me there. So I can't think of anything duller, quite frankly, than a club that is just for men, and which sounds a bit like a hair product, doesn't it, really, which I don't use. And the difficulty with it is I think that it takes us off in a different direction. The Garrick Club, I know, has got a reputation for good food and good wine, and I've been invited there twice but not been able to attend. And until recently, genuinely, I didn't know that it was men only. I've been to the Commonwealth Club, which I recommend to everybody. I met Debo Nwazu there, who's the founder of Black Lawyers Directory, probably around about 12, 15 years ago, and we then became sponsors of BLD. So I've been to lots of different clubs, and I think it's a symbolic thing more than anything else. I don't know enough about it, so I know that won't agree with everybody, but everybody's view, but this is a debate. And I think that it's important to knock down all of those things, but I'd be more impressed if we were pushing for things to include the representation at the Supreme Court and everything else, and those things are beginning to happen. In addition to Inez, who's on screen now, and also Lisa, the Crown Prosecutor for the West Midlands, Grace, is a black woman. We are starting to see change, and more needs to happen to make sure that change happens. Our set of chambers was the first set of chambers in Birmingham to have a female silk, in Estella Hinley, QC, who went on to become a circuit judge, sadly passed away. That was back in 1992. So I think things are changing, but we need to accelerate that change. Some time ago, I wrote an article for and when I say sometime, probably 12, 15 years ago, for the Institute of Legal Executives, and within it I was saying women need not apply, and I'll quickly tell you why that's there. If you're a law firm or a set of chambers and you invite the very best of talent to apply to join your firm or your chambers, and you then give them a training contract or a pupillage, etc., you spend a 6-figure sum in making sure they make the mark, and then the minute they say to you that they want to have a family, you sort of discard them. And you think, well, that's it, she's finished. I mean, if somebody said to you at the beginning of the process, here's £150,000, just wash it down the drain, that's essentially what you're doing by adopting that attitude. So I think that men in particular, within positions of influence and power, need to be making sure that conversations are held and that change is had within all sorts of law firms and organisations, so that we make it easier for people with caring responsibilities. We make it easier for people to come back into the workplace, and we positively encourage them to do so. I've been depressed over the years at the number of quality people that we've lost, female members of the bar, who have left, and I've had exit interviews with them and said to them, why are you leaving? And happily I can say that it wasn't because they felt as though that they were being picked on or discriminated, but it just wasn't a comfortable environment for them because we didn't have flexible working and things of that nature. And they said, I just can't balance this with that. Well, there was always a question of why, and now it's why not. There's nothing that we can't do now to make sure that we've got the key thing to make sure we do improve the figures for women, and that is retention, retention, retention. And that has to be at the top of everybody's list within a set of chambers or indeed within a law firm.
Thank you, Tony. We're going to hand over to Karen Bailey-Wright for her question that is addressed to Nick Green and Joe Wilson.
How long does the panel think that it will take the judiciary at both junior and senior levels to truly reflect the diversity of the population in England and Wales?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Shall I go first this time, Joe? I think I think it will take a long time. Unfortunately, I think we are reflective of society and reflective of where businesses and general arrangements are with various institutions around the country. I think the direction of travel for all types of inclusion and diversity is very positive at the moment. I think lots of people have completely changed their attitudes across so many different areas. And whether we're talking about gender, multicultural, disability, social mobility, lots of other areas, I think the direction of travel is good. However, the judiciary can try and drive this to go forward, and there's some very positive signs about changes. I do think, however, it will take time. And when we're talking about arrangements, whether it's changing from 10 to 20 to 30%, unfortunately, I think it will take time. People believe that it's the right thing to do and are pushing in that direction. So I think we're moving the right way, but I'm afraid I don't think it will be soon before there is true balance.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Yeah, I mean, if you break it down, if you look at gender, for example, women on the bench, this has been an issue, a contentious issue for many, many years. There was a senior judge who in 1980 said it would take 200 years to achieve gender parity. Lord Sumption in 2012 said it would take 50 years. And then more recently, at last year's bar conference, Lady Hale, Baroness Hale Brenda, as she's more commonly known, said that it would take 2033, so 14 years from last year. She was very precise. Based on the statistics, she said we would achieve gender parity by then. And I think if you look at the MOJ's statistics for competitions in 2019, 2020, the stats seem to support that, because 50% of all applications to the bench, whichever capacity that is, circuit judge or otherwise, 50% of them were for women. 45% were shortlisted and 45% were appointed. So I think we're seeing massive inroads there. Is 2033, is 14 years too 13 years too optimistic? I don't know. It's heading in completely right direction. But actually, if you look at other diversity points, BAME candidates, for example, it's grossly inadequate. I worked in judicial appointments in the mid-90s, before in the Lord Chancellor's Department, before it became the Judicial Appointments Commission and otherwise. And at that point, out of the something like 3,200 judges there were, that's court judges and tribunals, only 1.6 were BAME. Fast forward 24 years, I left in 22 years, in fact, I left in 1998. Fast forward now, there are slightly more judges, there's 5,000. But actually, it's the quota for BAME judges is still only at 8%. So that's been such marginal growth over that time. And I don't think things really changed until about 2013, when the Crime and Courts Act came into act and it was changed. The Constitutional Reform Act of 2005, it placed a duty on the Lord Chancellor and the Lord Chief Justice to ensure that there was diversity in the judiciary. And I think from that stage, it's a very key point, we have seen some rapid development. You could look at other areas like age. But that's always a difficult one when it comes to appointed judges, because of course experience is associated with age. I think the statistics there, something like 76% of court judges and 72% of tribunal judges are aged 50 and over. 40% from both camps are 60 and over. And that's a very, very hard one to address balance there. But if you try to package it up in its entirety to answer Karen's question, like Nick said, I don't think you could answer it. I think we will see gender parity, possibly by 2033, as Brenda Hale says, but in terms of BAME, age, and other characteristics, I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, tremendous amount of work.
Thank you, Joe. We have time for one more question from Caroline Coates for Lisa Jordan.
Does the panel believe that group litigation claims brought by UK lawyers against the British military, arising from actions in military engagement overseas on behalf of non-UK citizens, have tarnished the reputation and confidence in lawyers in England and Wales in the eyes of the public, bringing into question their motives, principles or profit?
Thanks, Caroline. A fascinating question. Can I just say, first of all, that although Irwin Mitchell have a specialist military team, we only act for service personnel, never against them, and we don't bring claims under the Human Rights Act or claims arising from events on the battlefield. This is obviously a question referring to the Phil Shiner's actions and then subsequently Lee Day. And as to whether those events tarnished the reputation of the profession, which I think is the question, my very simple answer is no, I don't think they did. I think that nobody condones certainly the Phil Shiner behaviour, but I think that the British public see that this is a small number of lawyers, and I think it's evident from the Lee Day experience that the public are intelligent enough to recognise that the acts of a small number of lawyers doesn't mean that the whole profession is tarnished. And as far as I can see, Lee Day's reputation and business hasn't been affected in any shape or form. They may say otherwise. Just finally, what does concern me, whenever I see attempts to demonise lawyers in this way, is whether there is an underlying political agenda. And I'm sorry to say that I think there is and was here. And we've heard about the government's desire to review the Human Rights Act, and I think that's what's behind these sorts of attempts to demonise individuals. It's not healthy. And again, I think that nobody wants to be defending actions that are indefensible, but I do think that we as a profession need to speak out and say, this isn't all of us.
Okay, it's been a very, very interesting discussion. There are so many more questions to be asked, but we're going to stop here. This is the first of many debates that Birmingham Law Society will be having. Watch this space, because hopefully the next one will be in the new year. I would like to thank Geoffrey Cox QC. Thank you so much for taking time to join us today. Nick Green, Joe Wilson, Lisa Jordan, Greg Lowson and Tony McDaid. I really appreciate your contributions to today's discussion. I'd also like to thank our participants who are viewing this discussion, and especially would like to once again thank our sponsors, Harrison Clark Rickaby's and also Wesleyan Financial Services. We appreciate your support. Thank you all, and see you again in the new year. And may I take this opportunity to wish you a happy Christmas. Thank you.
Happy New Year as well.
Happy New Year as well.
Bye.
Woo!